So this picture shows the architecture Hadoop 1.0, which was released in 2012 or 2013. Right now we have Hadoop 3.0, which is released a few months ago. So some of these elements change, but the actual map reduce logic and the map reduce process, they remain the same. So if you understand the specific of Hadoop 1.0, then we can also use the same knowledge to program Hadoop 2.0 and 3.0. So two basic units of Hadoop cluster is the slave node and the master node. So everything you see here are the slave node, and there's a master node which controls the slave node. So this box, the master node, should be above the name node. This is some typo in the picture. So there are two main software program abstractions or software code running inside the Hadoop cluster, the master node and the slave node. As the master node name implies, it is the coordinator for all the activities that goes in the MapReduce cluster. So then, and how master nodes takes input from your MapReduce code. So if you are here, your client, you are writing MapReduce program, then how master nodes take input your data and your MapReduce logic, and how it deploys on there is something you have to understand going forward. So first thing to understand is a master node runs two main processes. That includes the name node and the job tracker. So the main function of name node is to manage the index or the metadata about how my files are replicated on the Hadoop distributed file system, and what is their location. That could be the IP address, for example, or that could be the address on the storage system where that file is sitting, right? And the name node take help from something called data node, which is the local agents running on different slave nodes that maintains the index of the local files and then reports that to the master name node. And they work together to know how data is sitting across different computers, different slave nodes, how they're replicated, and henceforth. So whenever you write a MapReduce program, the client has to connect to the master node and gives his data file, whole data file location to the name node. Then what name node will do, it will copy the data into the Hadoop distributed file system and divide into the blocks of 128 MB and copies those data across the slave nodes. And the index of those blocks are dynamically generated by data nodes, and then it is passed on to the name node in the master node. So first step in programming a MapReduce cluster, Hadoop cluster, is data provisioning, because before you can do your map and reduce queries, you need the data. So the client passes all those data to the master node. It copies that to the Hadoop distributed file system, and this indexes the metadata about those data is generated. And then all data is copied across the slave nodes based on the replication factor that you've selected. By default, the replication factor for Hadoop cluster is 3, so every block is copied at least 3 times. So why you think they would be doing that? Why they're replicating data 3 times? What could be the reason for that? Why not just have 1 copy of the data? Why they are making 3 copies of the data on the Hadoop cluster? What could be the reason for that? Yeah, so that's true for fault tolerance. Normally, in Google and Facebook, they run a Hadoop cluster of thousands of nodes, and failures are so common. Failure of network link, failure of servers, failure of storage. So if they just have 1 copy of data, then they will lose the computations. But if they have 3 copies, then they can always start the mapper or reducer function on the new node. So that's why replication is so important. So first, the data is provisioned by the name node and data node into a slave node, and after that, the second step for the client or the programmer is to give your map and reduce logic to the master node, which is then given to the job tracker on the master node, which distributes those map and reduce logic across the slave nodes with the help of something called task tracker. So if you look at this picture, the task tracker is subordinate to the job tracker running on the master node, and data node is a subordinate to the name node running on the master node, and this map and reduce are subordinate to the task tracker. So this task tracker actually manages the execution of map and reduce function, and then monitors and then reports the status of their execution to the master node. So to the job tracker. So in case some map reduce fails, it can restart the process. So how you think they would be tracking whether this map reduce is running or not? What would be the simplest way they must be using to track whether this node has failed or not? So there's like some kind of ping or heartbeat message. They just ping the IP address of this node and figure out whether still is reachable. Of course, sometimes it can happen that this MapReduce code has bugs, right? So although you think it's running, it might be in deadlock. So those kind of pings cannot figure out whether your map is actually running or it's under deadlock. So only way to fix is to write your own monitoring tool that can actually figure out whether you are doing the real computation or you are just in a deadlock. So that's some demonstration will show you how to find a deadlock in MapReduce code. Because that could also happen if you're running thousands of instances of MapReduce code and your code has a bug. Although on the ping, the job tracker will think those nodes are running, but actually they're not running because your logic is in the deadlock, you have a bug. So how to debug a large-scale MapReduce cluster is a big technical challenge as well, because you have thousands of MapReduce running. If there's a simple hardware failure, that's hard to debug. But mostly the hardware failure doesn't happen. Mostly the software exceptions happen inside the slave node. And debugging that is really complicated. And that is something not supported by MapReduce Hadoop cluster. So only solution for them is they'll just restart that map process on a new node. But again, if we had a bug inside the map code, the bug will still come up and you will never finish your computation. So that's why we need low-level debugging and monitoring, and we will be demonstrating that after my lecture. So on the slave node, task tracker is responsible for starting the map and reduce functions or logic on that node, and map and reduce function, as the name implies, does the mapping phase and the reduce phase over the data. So when you program your MapReduce application, you need to understand all these abstractions, task tracker, data node, MapReduce, and being able to manage your application around this software abstraction. So this is something you have to keep in mind. This is the other picture that shows how different elements of the Hadoop cluster are interacting with them. As you see, the job tracker talks to task tracker, which started MapReduce process, and then they also need to talk to the Hadoop distributed file system, which is managed by name node and data node, because they supply the data to the MapReduce process. So these all things need to work together. So the Hadoop cluster manager will make all these things work together as long as your MapReduce code is bug-free. If the MapReduce code has a bug-free, doesn't matter how smart is the Hadoop cluster, nothing will finish and nothing will void. So this was Hadoop 1.0. As I said, now we have Hadoop 2.0 as well. And as you see here, so what's the difference in this one as compared to this one? What's the difference you see in terms of architecture of Hadoop 1 and Hadoop 2? What's the new things you see in this picture? Yeah. So now we have two instead of master node, right? So now all the name node is the HDFS master node, and the job tracker is replaced by resource yarn master node. So now what they have done is they have decomposed the master node into two nodes. One node is responsible for managing the data, so this node does the data provisioning, and other node does the scheduling of that. So now the job tracker becomes the yarn resource manager, scheduler, and application manager. So pretty much they have decomposed the job of the job tracker into three other components. And now you have the data node, but then now task tracker is replaced by the node manager. So these are some of the differences you have as compared to Hadoop 1, Hadoop 2.0. I don't know if we have a code running in Hadoop 1, can it run in Hadoop 2 automatically, or we have to do some transformation? We need to do. So he was working on Hadoop 1, then Hadoop 2, now Hadoop 3. So he has experience with all three. So if we have a code running on Hadoop 1, you have to run it here. Maybe you have to update it to meet this new abstraction, node manager, resource manager. So these are the challenges you will face when you work in a company. Suddenly your IT manager will say, now we want to use Hadoop 3 because the experiments say that Hadoop 3 is 30% more faster than Hadoop 1, and now you have to take all your code and now put in Hadoop 3. That's also a challenge. So we can do that if you understand the fundamental differences between Hadoop 1, Hadoop 2, and Hadoop 3 architecture, and then being able to port your code. So what do you think would be advantage of separating, instead of having a task track and have a generalized node manager? How this could help you if you're working for some very big company with big data problem? So as the name implies, node manager, now it is not specific to MapReduce. It's not a task tracker now. So this node manager can play a role of task tracker, but it can also play a role of stream processing manager for a Spark cluster as well. So with this abstraction, what you can do is you can run multiple big data frameworks on the same cluster, where the node manager can take a role of a task tracker, but it can also take a role of a Spark task tracker as well. So this is the main reason why they separated the data provisioning from the job provisioning, and so that they can run multiple big data programming frameworks on the same cluster. For example, you can mix Apache Hadoop with Apache Spark and they run together. And then you can run different instances of node manager, one managing Hadoop cluster, other managing Spark cluster. That was the main reason why they came up with this architecture, because this YARN stands for yet another resource management architecture, because it is more flexible. You can plug in different kind of data processing framework as part of the same cluster, which is actually is required in real companies where they do real data processing. It's not that we are doing fake data processing, but the real production scale data processing. So this is what I meant here. So your YARN resource manager can talk to a node manager which is managing the Hadoop elements, but you can also talk to something that is managing the stream processing Spark element. You can also talk to something that is managing a NoSQL graph processing database. So you can run multiple big data frameworks on the same cluster, and each one of them are doing different function as part of the data analysis workflows. That's how the real big data production infrastructure works. So as you see, between Hadoop 1 and Hadoop 2, what is the main difference? What's the main difference between Hadoop and Hadoop 2? The main difference is this new layer, the resource management layer, that actually lets you plug in many big data frameworks together as part of the same cluster. And what's the common feature across those frameworks? They all use HDFS, Hadoop Distributed File System, to store and process data. So this is a kind of limitation as well as advantage as well. But for example, the original file system used by Spark it was not HDFS. For example, if you want to use Spark on this YARN cluster, you will change the data to HDFS. So there is both advantage as well as limitation as well. If you look at, so one of the competitors for Spark is Apache Storm, developed by Yahoo. They use HDFS. So even the stream processing, if you don't want to change much, and you want to do stream processing along with the Hadoop processing, instead of using Spark, you use Apache Storm, because similar to Apache Hadoop, they use the same Hadoop distributed file systems. These are some of the design decisions you have to do for your big data processing in a real production environment. So firstly, Hadoop 1 and Hadoop 2 used to work on virtual machines. Now, in the last few years, they also move it to Docker and Kubernetes as well. So of course, if this is going to move to Docker, this will have integration with Docker Swarm and OL networking. So you need to know those knowledge if you're on network this. So that's why all those topics that we cover in different lectures need to come together if you want to really work on a production environment, because all of those has to be really working together. So between Hadoop 2 and Hadoop 3, they differ based on how they manage fault tolerance. So for example, in Hadoop 2, they use replication. In Hadoop 3, they use the coding, the information coding system to find the replications, just some different mechanism. They also depend on where they store the data, and the experiments show that Hadoop 3 on the same data size can work 30 times much faster than Hadoop 2. So if you are working in a production environment, your IT manager will definitely ask you to move your code to Hadoop 3 because it's just faster. But then it means you have to reprogram a lot of things, a lot of components, and make it work. So that will be a lot of programming overhead to do that. But I guess that's the challenge of working in computer science, because things keep changing. For example, I did my PhD on grid computing. Now I'm teaching cloud computing, so it keeps changing. And now next semester I will teach IoT and drones and something else, which has nothing to do with what I did for my PhD. So this is the challenge of computer science. It always keeps changing, and you have to keep track of the new trends and new technologies as you go. We can't be stuck to the old something we know. We always have to learn new things. Right. So now going a little bit more in detail of those components, the basic components, and this is given based on Hadoop core architecture, node 2 and 3. So the first element, as I said, was the name node. So name node was responsible for your data provisioning and data management. So the name node gets the data. It distributes by default into the blocks of 128 MB and replicates those data across the data nodes, creates those indexes. Those indexes look something like that. That includes what is the name of the data block, on which host it is sitting, and what's the IP address, and what's the actual location on that storage drive on that data node. So pretty much, if this is your file, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and say imagine that each of them is 128 MB, then what it does is just creates 3 copies of each of the microservers, because that's the default replication factor. So you have 3 copies of 1, 3 copies of 2, and 3 copies of 3, based on what, and this is configurable. You can also change it to 2 or minimum 1, but based on how much fault tolerance you need, you can configure your HDFS replication factor. But by default is 3. Right? So as I said, the name node and HDFS, they split the file into blocks of 128 MB. Then those blocks are replicated across the data nodes. The metadata index is created, and that index is shared with the name node, because it needs to know where data is sitting. And also along with that, the name node and the HDFS does many other kind of optimization on the data, so that the network I/O and disk I/O is optimized at runtime. But that's all done by default. They use caching, multi-level caching, to speed up access to the data through when the MapReduce process is running. So as I said, name node is the main process that knows where your data is sitting, right? So name node becomes a single point of failure. If your name node in your Hadoop cluster fails, you can't do any processing on your data. So the way to solve it is that they replicate the name node on a second node, which is called as the secondary name node. So in that case, if the name node fails, the secondary name node can take over the Hadoop cluster and do the data provision. So this is again, you need replication at the level of name node as well, so that you can handle failures, because failures are very common. Of course, having a secondary name node is a bit optional. It depends on you whether you want to have that fault tolerance or not, but this feature is available for you. So here, these all represent data nodes that maintains different data blocks, and those data blocks regularly update their file name, block ID, IP address to the name node, which for fault tolerance is also synchronized with the secondary name node. So in case the primary name node fails, the other node can still manage your data provisioning on the Hadoop cluster. So data node is the actual process that stores data on the HDFS file system. It is responsible for local management of the access to the data, provide those access IP address and metadata to the name node. Along with that, it is also responsible to provision data to local MapReduce process, because as I said, the MapReduce process is going to run on those nodes where data nodes are, so it is responsible to provision those data to the MapReduce process. So what will happen if I'm running a MapReduce process on this data node, but this data node doesn't have the data that I need from a map process based on the key value pair? So what's going to happen in that case? Because when I distribute the data, I actually don't know which key value pair I will generate and which node gets which data, which blocks, right? So it may happen that I start a MapReduce process here, and my data that I need is not there. So what could happen in that case? what mechanism they might be implementing to do that. So you can't do any processing on the data if you don't have the data, right? And data is randomly distributed across your cluster. And if you are running a mapper code here, it needs certain data which is not there. So what will happen? Or it can never happen. If you understand the MapReduce process, you will be able to answer this question. Can it happen that there is no data that mapper needs, so it will never happen? It will never happen because the mapper generates key available from the data itself. It doesn't matter which data is there, that problem is not going to happen, right? Because it's going to read that block and based on that it say what keys I can generate, so that won't happen. So that problem doesn't occur. But wouldn't that be nice if I somehow have some intelligence to group my mapper functions together, which they are doing processing for the same keys, and then on the same node I do the reduce function as well, so that I don't have to do a lot of data transfer from mappers to reducer. So there's a lot of research in MapReduce on there, how to localize the placement of mapper reducer process on the same server rack, so that after the mappers have finished, I copy the data to the reducer on the same rack. So then there's a lot of optimization on that, where to start the reducer, and that could be done as part of your job tracker scheduling. So that's where, if you start your reducer node, on the same server rack where the relevant mapper processes are for that particular key, you will save a lot of bandwidth of not copying the data to the new server rack where you need data for the reducer node. So there's a lot of research process on that, how to localize the MapReduce process on the same server rack, so you save a lot on network I/O and the disk I/O. So as I said, the replication factor in the name node and HDFS can be controlled by you. So if you specify for a file replication factor in 3, it will copy to 3 nodes. If you specify your replication factor in 2, it will do 2 nodes. If you're on 1, so these all are pretty much configurable. And as I said before, this name node and secondary node, they keep synchronizing their metadata over a period of time, so that if something fails, they can always recover the metadata and they keep the cluster running. Similarly, data node, they keep sending the heartbeat messages to the name node to make sure that they have not failed and they can be part of the processing. So if some data node fails to send heartbeat messages, that node is marked as the failure, and then the MapReduce processes running on that node is restarted on the different data node which has the same set of data that is replicated. So this is why you need coordination between job tracker, data node, and task tracker, because to handle these failures at the runtime. So heartbeat messages by default is configured every 3 seconds. So every 3 seconds, data node has to send a message to the name node saying that it is alive, and if for that 3 seconds it doesn't hear from the data node, it will restart a new data node to replace that data node, and will start replicating from the available replicas on the cluster. So that was about name node, data node, and HDFS, which is required for provisioning data to the Hadoop processes, MapReduce processes. Now the second set of entities, they refer to the computation side of it, how to do actually the computation on the data, and that refers to the job tracker and the task tracker. So job tracker is pretty much the centralized computational manager inside the Hadoop cluster, whose job is to start and monitor, to accept MapReduce jobs, start it on the slave nodes with the help of task tracker, and make sure that the MapReduce jobs finish the task what they are assigned. And if something failure happens, is also responsible for restarting those MapReduce job on the slave node. So this is the scheduling or provisioning engine for MapReduce. So after data is provisioned by HDFS, this guy takes over and starts deploying your MapReduce logic and start doing the computation on that. So job tracker and task tracker is responsible for starting the map task, then copying the data from map task with the same keys to the reduce task. This is called shuffling process in Hadoop terminology. And then when data is copied, responsible for starting the reduce processes and then aggregate the data and send the final results to the user. So if you look in terms of the In terms of the UML diagram, it would be a client submits the analytic queries and data to the job tracker, then the job tracker queries the name node to determine how data was split, so that it knows which mapper to start where, if possible. Then job tracker selects the task tracker and puts try to put mapper process near to the data if possible, because the key value pair will be by default generated inside the job tracker when you do the application. So you have two options at that point. You just randomly assign, or you can always assign based on the data locality. Again, how to do the data locality is a big research problem. It's based on what data you have. It's not a straightforward way. And then once the task tracker finished execution of map and reduce processes, the results is returned back to the client. So from exam perspective, you need to understand this process, how different steps happen in MapReduce cluster, because this also determines if you want to program an application, you need to know these steps and how. So in the exam, if I ask this kind of question, it will be based on Hadoop 1 architecture, not 2 or 3, because most of slides are on that. Now coming back to, I know you all know about Docker Compose now, but if you work with Hadoop, there is something called Hadoop Compose, and unlike Docker Compose, Hadoop Compose has more than 190 parameters. So as I say, it's much harder to work with Hadoop Compose than Docker Compose. But all those Hadoop engineers who work on that, they know how to configure those Hadoop parameters, because here you can configure what is your block size, how many MapReduce you need, how to handle failures, a lot of things. But again, you need to understand each of those parameters for real production environment. Now going back to our original orchestration operations, most of those things that we study in context of web application is handled by your Hadoop framework. So image selection, deployment integration, monitoring. At very abstract level or very trivial level, they can do it, but if you want more smarts, then you have to write again the algorithm for each of those. You get the point? So Hadoop framework gives you a basic way to monitor your slave and master node. It gives you a very basic way to network them together. It gives you a basic way, if something fails, how to handle that. But if you want more smart, more predictive algorithms, you may have to override the basic algorithms of Hadoop, and you have to do all those things the way we study for web applications. Yeah. So I think with that, that's enough. There are some extra slides that you can study for your extra knowledge if you want, but that's not important for the exams. For exams, we cover all the topics. Now what I have to show is a demonstration how actually you program a Hadoop cluster, how you deploy your MapReduce code, and how do you monitor it.